example. There's just one example of Brave. So it's meant to be like a privacy first, truly decentralized form of internet browsing, because end of the day, Google Chrome is still owned by Google. And if you were to look into messaging, so this is just one of the use cases where they complement other Web 2.0, 3.0 phases. You were only confined to just emails, but now you can dynamically chat with people anytime, anywhere, more interactively with sharing of photos and videos via WhatsApp messaging. And end of the day, WhatsApp is owned by Meta, and there are some power outages at some point, and it's still owned by a central big tech. So an example of a messaging app like Status is actually developed by decentralized autonomous organizations, also known as DAOs. So this is like an open platform of developer community. So interface may look a little bit like WhatsApp, but there's also it's pretty much linked with like crypto wallets, so you're able to like pay with your friends as well. Social media, well, in Web 1.0, it pretty much doesn't exist, similar to storage as well. So those are new use cases that is only enabled by later phases of the internet, such as your Facebook, your Google Chrome. And for some social media in like Web 3.0, this is just one example. It's like a blog platform where people get to dictate their content and monetize it directly via cryptocurrency. So this is the idea of this intermediation. And if we were to look at streaming, so now it's YouTube owned by Google, and Odyssey claims to be like freedom of speech first, transparency and open first platform for video and content sharing. So the idea here is this intermediation. And unsurprisingly, some use cases or new use cases emerge as we move towards Web 3.0. So what are the new ones? I mean, payment ripples, so that's like blockchain payment. Smart appliances is basically like Internet of Things. So we are shifting away towards not just mobile only, but a diversity of wearable technologies. Think of you being able to curate content, download content on your smartphone, smartwatch, smart TV, etc. And even the idea of the development of spatial technologies, your AR, VR. So Metaverse is just a new channel that came out of this spatial technology. So think of having a digital twin in a new digital universe, and Decentraland being one of the major providers. So if we move next. Right. So this is a comparison table of the idea of Web 1, 2, and 3, and we have briefly already elaborated on the consumer experience and data ownership bit of it. It's worth to note that the founder of the internet, Tim Berners-Lee, had already envisioned a utopia internet where he was saying that one day I want the internet to be bottom up, which means that you don't get central authorities to just curate content, but anybody, anywhere, and also decentralized, meaning you do not have to go through a platform intermediary. And I mean, the indicative trend seems to be moving towards that idealized idea, and that was when he envisioned it in the 1990s. So this philosophy may not necessarily be enabled by blockchain at that time. And in 2005, 2006, he was also talking about the idea of semantic web. So basically about your computer or internet being a lot more intelligent in processing data. Like I say, instead of a network of static web pages, the internet is actually able to read information within it to interpret contextually for better service, etc. So with that, the internet economy as well has been shifting. So information economy and then platform economy, this is where all your content creators monetize via platforms. But now in the creator economy with a very decentralized network, it's pretty much a more like I own my data, I own my content, and I don't have to rely on the intermediary to monetize my revenues or even be under censorship sort of control. Challenges, of course, Web 1.0, unsurprisingly, lack of communication. Web 2.0 pain points are often discussed everywhere at the moment since we're still at 2.0. So that's the idea of data ownership, since big tech and platforms have a lot of power at the moment. And malware, because currently, if everybody is centralized across single platforms like WhatsApp, you're susceptible to a single point of attack. So in Web 3.0, like not everything is a bed of roses as well. When everything becomes truly anonymous and truly peer-to-peer, of course, it attracts a lot of illegal activities. So stuff like money laundering, terrorism finances, and all that is quite a concern. And artificial intelligence, I mean, if you were playing with ChatGPT, I think you would probably know about some of its limitations and issues that arise from AI. And finally, governance, when things become truly decentralized, the idea of a governance framework is still up in the air. So if you want to have like a look and feel in how does a Web 1.1, Web from 1 to 3 looks. So in Web 1.1, data is situated in localized on-prem servers via wires. And as a user, you're only confined to desktops, not even laptops, and your command of information will be on a click and type basis. Whereas right now, the proponent here is cloud technology and smartphones. So you tend to use and interact with the internet via a touch and swipe mode. And now with more supporting or enabling technologies, we are pretty much on a wearable device basis. So even if the way you interact with the internet is more on a show and tell basis. Right. So finally, the question, what is Web 3.0? By the way, if you were to Google Web 3.0 and if you were to read various different materials, different companies, different industries, they have very different perspectives of the definition of Web 3.0. Because end of the day, it is a fuzzy concept. So it's just a fuzzy gray area space that people would just loosely call it as a next generation concept of internet. But generally, if you were to summarize across various different perspectives, the main idea here is that the defining features are things are more distributed. So like I said, the 3D decentralized is distributed and democratized. Smart. So smart here is where the internet is more intelligent, semantic is contextual. So you get any internet related services anytime, anywhere, anyhow, hyper personalized. So you're no longer reliant on like most popular video views, but rather, the internet's a lot smarter to know what's relevant in the context of whatever you are looking for. And conversationally in natural language input. So you don't have to like write proper commands in English or any like other languages. Immersive as well. So now with you're not just confined to your smartphones, everything is wearable, and with a new channel like Metaverse. So I think this is more like in the gaming industry. So Metaverse may emerge as a nascent channel via spatial technologies. So all of this is enabled by 4 of these main supporting technologies, which I think unsurprisingly, blockchain is one of the newer ones, whereas the rest is more on the maturing space. Right, okay. So now that we get a rough idea of what Web 2.0 is, why are people adopting it or how? So the reason why we are moving towards Web 2.0 are just, an example of some of these key drivers. So on a user experience perspective, I'm pretty sure you all can relate that things are becoming more immersive, whether in the learning and development area, your mixed reality, online physical convergence, contextual as well, on-demand internet service basically, and personalized, intelligent algorithms. So we've already mentioned this just now. Business efficiency, of course, various industries are interested to cut costs, intermediate, automate everything, and this is backed by various different technologies. In fact, recently in the Singapore Fintech Festival, the CEO of DBS Bank was saying that blockchain will one day power the world's back office. So data democratization and decentralization. So I've already elaborated on the 3D quite a bit. So data democratization here really addresses one of the major pain points in Web 2.0. And this is pretty much enabled through blockchain mostly because you have a secure and transparent way of actually tracking your data so it's like purpose bound and decentralized. So here is more on a cyber attack point of view and also on a freedom and speech point of view, because when data is stored in various peer-to-peer nodes, the data is a lot more resilient, and of course things are more open and transparent because the power and control is moved away from central authorities. Moving on. So if we were to observe what institutions are doing on a regional, global, and even national level, we subdivided it into 3 major categories. So starting with funding, I think everyone is well aware that we're in a bear market right now. But do note that despite the tech slowdown and crypto winter, investors are still investing in Web 3.0 technologies. However, there is more scrutiny into ensuring that they do provide real value in building Web3 ecosystems. So similarly, for national developments, the government and even sovereign wealth funds are investing in components relating or building towards this ecosystem, whether on a monetary, research, talent level, etc. So on the industry side, there are various different use cases that observe across various different industries, like metaverse partnerships. Gucci does it, HSBC does it. It's mostly for client engagement or even employee empowerment. Crypto exchanges, so this is the new revenue stream, new business model basically. NFTs to staff. So our guy here, credits to him, where you actually can use your NFTs to redeem like various coupons and vouchers in our merchant tie-ups. So that's like employee benefits sort of thing. Supply chain, trade finance, and ESG. So with IoTs, you get a more automated and precise tracker of things relating to this space. So supply chain. On ecosystems in Singapore, we have your Partior. So this is quite famous in the fintech world. It's a JAB of three major companies basically on payment clearing and settlements via blockchain network. Singapore Fintech Association, they have come up with this Web3 subcommittee for responsible technology, and various researchers as well, both in NUS and NTU on Web3 related work. So for government, so this was a space that I used to be in. On the conservative side, aka policy amendments, the government in the region in general, if they were to look at licensing, they look at two major areas. You are either a digital asset on the digital payment space or a digital asset in the security space. So that's where buy and sell. So that's on gatekeeping. But of course, there's also a lot of policy amendments to address new ways of conducting business models and specific risk relating to all of these new technologies. Of course, that's just on the prudential side of things. There's also a lot of developmental work going on. So there's your R&D, use case exploration, infrastructure, and talent development as well. So Project Guardian and Project Orchid is basically digital asset related work. This is led by MAS. So Project Guardian would be like your payment settlement, and Project Orchid would be on your retail CBDC, so purpose-bound money. Project Ubin Dunbar and Ubin Plus is your wholesale CBDC, so this is digital asset space. And some frameworks in AI, again, responsible tech and related path by federal government on talent attraction and upskilling. Go next. Right. So now, if we were to narrow in on just the financial services space, like the implication, I think this comes to no surprise, given the various elaboration that we have gone through just now. So this is really just a summary slide on various areas that a bank or financial service provider will look in anticipation to a new internet. So products and service, as mentioned, new business models, addressing new pain points. So there are various different metrics and calculations to look into cost savings and revenue. And on the customer side as well, there's a lot of demand on contextual, personalized, and even embedded, basically invisible banking journeys. So some of it leading to cost savings, but there's this one quote by McKinsey that I noticed has been used a lot everywhere, especially when you talk about metaverse, is that, there will be like a $5 trillion value creation generated in that digital universe. So floating around everywhere when people talk about metaverse. Employees as well, reskilling is a very important thing, and the immersive spatial experience as well will probably enhance learning and development, ops and process. So OCBC does a lot of things on the ops and process side. Like for example, we have our blockchain platform for various use cases. Basically, the idea here is faster, cheaper, accessible, and transparent. And tech infra, constant upgrade needed to ensure that these new business models are supported, backed by additional savings as well. So you need to ensure that your infrastructure is future-proof. So if Web 3.0 is all, a bit of roses, why aren't we there yet? So these are just some of the learnings that we had as, my team and I are trying to embrace emerging technologies. First being, of course, technological maturity, since it's still an up-and-coming space. And one of the biggest talk of the town is often scalability. So because inherently it's a peer-to-peer node, right? Transactions are slow. So just for comparison, the transaction per second size for Visa is 24,000, whereas Bitcoin is 7 and Ethereum after the great merge is 20. But of course, there is a lot of developmental work in this space. But at the end of the day, it's still and the transactions that claim to surpass Visa as well is just a proof of concept or an idea. So it's still under development. Accessibility and interoperability, with a lot of activity going around this space, there are issues regarding standards and interoperability. So that's a challenge to establish, everybody centralized, right? Who is in charge here? User adoption, like how Web 2.0 is really for help when everybody uses smartphones. It really takes time for us to really see at what point does it, the whole idea of user adoption truly emerges. Is it VR goggles? I think Apple is like coming up with VR goggles in end 2023. We don't know, but there must be a new component. Governance as well. So the integrity of all these DeFi and digital autonomous organizations, basically your decentralized version of a company, also varies widely, like I said, because there is no central and quality control. So risk and regulations. Actually, all of these, right, data, regulatory heterogeneity, and flood accountabilities are also issues that Web 2.0 face. But I suppose when you want to embrace Web 3.0, these issues are a lot more pertinent to be resolved before you actually go into it, because think about Web 3.0 as like a borderless community, and traditional value chains as well is a lot more blurred. So it's an issue that has become a lot more pertinent. And finally, people and talent, like, technology is fast growing and evolving space, and sometimes talent demand pretty much outpaces supply. So there's a lot of dynamic reskilling work involved. So skill set gap is a pretty big issue. So what is OCBC doing? So generally our strategy is we want to be a fast follower to stay in the game. And we are experimenting on these related technologies to create product services. So that's pretty much what my team and I are working on. So Jordan will pretty much elaborate a bit of these initiatives. So I mean, just to classify or categorize in some of these areas, like for example, blockchain, which is a big space in Web 3.0. We actually have our own in-house blockchain infrastructure, the OCBC blockchain platform, and upskill our staff by training them. And these are all the various use cases that can use via your blockchain as a service. AI, some of the use cases, IoT use cases and infrastructure, and AR, VR, we have a virtual OCBC building in our Smart A12 brand. So I'll pass the mic over to Jordan to dive into blockchain.
Hello. Thank you. Yeah. So hi. As mentioned by Celine, right? So blockchain is a pretty key focus for the bank, and therefore I'm here to speak a bit more about what we are doing with blockchain, answer some of your questions about anything that's related, right? Except crypto trading. That I can help. Now, I'm Jordan. So I basically look after the blockchain architecture and engineering at OCBC Bank. So any technical questions, feel free to ask, right? But OCBC really sees the blockchain enabling the bank to move forward, right? Not just in Web3, but as the bank itself, primarily in two components. The first component is, of course, digital assets. Some of these keywords, CBDCs. How many of you actually know what's a CBDC? Raise of hands. Okay, for those that you don't know, it is central bank digital currency, right? It's kind of like, think of it as cash, but digital, controlled by government, whether or not on blockchain, not necessarily. But in the case of the NUS initiatives, many of them has been experimented to be on public blockchains, private blockchains, so on and so forth. Therefore, CBDC is seen as a digital asset, which is something that we are working on the blockchain. Tokenized assets, another similar thing, right? If I can put cash on the blockchain, can I put my bonds? Can I put my equities, my unit trusts, and all other stuff on the blockchain? Answer is, I kind of can, right? The question here is, what evolves after that? After I put it on the blockchain, how do I distribute this to clients? How do I underwrite the product so that it makes sense and stuff? These are all considerations that we are actively engaging right now in our digital asset component of the blockchain. And NFTs, another show of hands. How many of you have heard of NFTs? How many of you own an NFT? Oh, okay, nice. Good to see a few show of hands. Yes, lady. So yes, now NFTs primarily, a lot of people have been purporting all sorts of utilities of NFTs, right? Oh, I can use it as a profile picture. Oh, I can use it to access a very exclusive club and stuff, right? Yes, but I think where OCBC really sees NFTs is in the technology, right? Both the technology and the paradigm. The paradigm of NFT is what we see as one of the key gateways to achieving or getting closer to Web3. In the set, we're not talking about bot apes, okay? We're not talking about having a bot all our LinkedIn photos becoming bot ape, probably not anytime soon. But the empowerment that comes from these concepts, right? Individuality, and even on the technology side, where we see how we can more efficiently assign a right of any arbitrary item to any arbitrary owner. This is something that on the technology side, we see massive potential for NFTs. Take, for example, ownership of bonds. Given how the bonds are structured, we could even use NFT technology to actually make the process of distribution, reconciliation, or settlement of trades be even more efficient. So it's not just about profile pictures, guys. That said, this pretty much is self-explanatory on the digital asset side, literally digitized assets, right? But what about other blockchain use cases? So when we think about it, it's more than just the digital assets, right? So we want to be prepared for an economy and an eventuality where assets becoming more and more digitized, right? One day, China doesn't even use cash, right? And we are using cash here. So, sorry, paper money, right? Yeah. So when we move forward and we think about how the future of payments, settlements will look like, this is where digital assets really come in. We can use the same technology for even more. Because if you think about it, why is the reason why blockchain is such a good use case for digital assets, to the point that governments around the world are looking at it, experimenting on it, and even the entire cryptocurrency industry is using it as its backbone, is because of some fundamental, I would say, tenets, right? In the case of transparency, auditability, shared execution and computation, security benefits and stuff, Byzantine fault tolerance, for example, these are technologies that enable digital assets to be more secure, more easily available, and it creates various models to occur. We see that these same benefits can accrue to back office processes. Even, for example, version control is something that we have seen, where tracking a version of a document or any arbitrary object can be simply recorded on the blockchain, is transparent so that anyone can easily get the latest information anytime. Take, for example, you have a presentation to your professor, right? Your teammate screws up and prints the outdated version of the document, and none of you really know until you check the slides, right? You literally have to check one by one the whole slide in order to figure out whether this is the outdated version or not. Because sometimes the change can be so minor. It could be just one word, one letter, or a picture, right? And if you have a 40-page deck, you have to check through everything and make sure it's the same. It's pretty troublesome, right? And I think where we can offload some of this tediousness by automating the process of checking your stuff on the blockchain. You can generate a hash form, put in a QR code, scan it to see whether this copy of the document is the latest version or not. These are things that we can easily throw into the blockchain and help us and enjoy the benefits, right? So another one is data defragmentation. And I think that is more coming from a world where we see things as systems, right? When you look at things, you look at your banking systems, even within banking system, you have so many different ones. You have payment processors, you have your prices and stuff. You have one system for everything, right? But what you see is that data becomes incredibly isolated and fragmented in these various ecosystems. Where we see is that potentially we can even enhance this by aggregating public data, right? Or in the case of sensitive data, we can always encrypt it, store it on the blockchain, so that it's easier to assess, is more transparent to assess. And I think, and even when we want to update information and stuff, it's all logged. So we always have the most updated records, and people pretty much any tampering or stuff recorded in the blockchain. So in a nutshell, this is where OCBC comes and sees where the blockchain can really help in terms of technology in the bank. Next slide, please. Oh, there already. Nice, thank you. All right. So, what are some fundamental features of the blockchain that makes it a bit more different from using traditional centralized databases, right? I can spin up a MongoDB or something. So why don't I do that? Why do I want to use blockchain? Now, there's a whole host of things over there, but I'd like to just highlight maybe a few of them. I think transparency is something that everyone's pretty familiar, right? Because everywhere people talk about the amazing transparency in the blockchain, right? I think where we really look at, and I think this is a few key things that are very important. One is the technology. The technology be enabling certain benefits at a computational level. But the other, you have to see as governance, right? The more operational aspects, the more paradigm aspects, right? Take, for example, creation of assets. Now, if I want to create a bond today, I have to hire lawyers, I have to underwrite this process and stuff. Now, let's say I tokenize this bond, all right, instead. Different paradigm, right? Let's say I tokenize this bond on the blockchain according to a certain standard. It could be ERC 1155, ERC 721 for those knowledgeable. The good thing about the blockchain is that it sets an interoperable standard already, pretty much across any network, be it a public network like Ethereum or Polygon, with private networks that people want to run themselves. If you adhere to these standards, technology allows you to do interesting stuff. For example, atomic swaps. You're able to swap across two different networks without having to fully trust the other person. And if you think about it, these kind of interoperable problems that were used to be present in the finance industry, solved by middlemen, can now be achieved to a greater degree in a disintermediated way. And this is one of the key aspects that we are looking at on the blockchain at a computational and governance level. Of course, the other would be the more pragmatic one, cost and speed efficiency, right? When you look at, let's say, applications, if I have to spin up a virtual machine for each individual application, that is going to cost me a lot of money. But if I throw these in as a smart contract into the blockchain platform, which is already, I have already a dedicated number of nodes, all those things, the computation being shared across these 4 nodes on an on-demand basis. Now, this is where I can start seeing some cost savings, right? And I can, if I don't require to be in real time, I could even enhance it even further by netting the cost requirements that I have, further bringing down the cost. So in this case, there are pragmatic reasons, there are paradigm reasons, but all in all, it all sums up to 3 key features, right? The fact that the fact that data is distributed across different parties, achieving some of the key traits that we see here: transparency, availability, for example. The fact that cryptography is a key computational enabler that enables to achieve interoperability and security. And also the fact that through decentralized networks, we see the benefits of disintermediation and others, allowing us to achieve trustlessness, in a way, better trust, because they're really just trusting the algorithm, right? And cost and speed efficiency. These are really the fundamental traits that OCBC look at when we are trying to apply blockchain into the company. Next slide, please. Some of the initiatives that we have already worked on in the blockchain, that's already going live, right? So as you can see, we already announced our retail CBDC pilot, which was published in States Times. We are working with the MAS and CPF for retail CBDC in this case. Another one that we have is OCBC issued NFTs. So if one day you go to OpenSea and you'll see CBDC NFTs, that would be quite interesting, right? And this primarily, as a start, given to staff, of course. We work so hard for company, but yes, the other, of course, being cross-border payments, which is something that we have been experimenting across a long period of time, trying to see how tokens and blockchain networks enable us to reduce costs, increase efficiency and speed of settlement for cross-border payments. So that's it. I believe we have come to the end. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. So I think in many cases, people like to put a huge distinction in Web3 and Web2, right? They look at Web3, wow, this is the future, and this is really quite crazy and stuff. But in actual fact, it is quite, there are similarities, there are differences. I would say it's just next step in the evolution in the way we approach things. So thank you for your time. I think now it's FAQ, right? Yeah, when Celine and I will be taking questions. So thank you so much. Clap.
Hope if people ask you what's the difference, you don't say one.
Maybe not wrong. All right. So any questions? First takers, anything? Any questions?
I think just now you mentioned like a lot of aspects that you are focusing on, right? Like probability, scalability, all this. But I think like my question is, as a major bank in Singapore, right? Is there one particular like aspect that you're focusing on, or is there one that's like posing like the most evident challenge?
I think. Okay. Actually, when you think about blockchain technology, right, it really is an amalgamation of various kinds of technologies, right? If I particularly want to focus in just one area, it might be better suited for me to look at the technology that's best suited to the area. If I'm looking at cryptography, right, I don't really need a blockchain for that, right? I can look to cryptographic algorithms, see asymmetric or symmetric encryption, which is better for me, hashing, etc., etc. If I am looking for interoperability, existing standards might work even better because I don't need everyone to conform to a single standard, right? So I say what I would say is that the blockchain comes best when we are looking to reap the benefits of a few, if not all, of these factors or traits, right? Then it really makes sense to use the blockchain. If it's looking at just one individual one, we probably can find a technology better suited.
Actually, just to chime in on what the ex-CIO, Chief Innovation Officer of DBS say, you don't front load or prioritize the technology because technology is the brick. You envision the use case and pain point. You envision the house. So how it's being built really depends on what are the relevant tools. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any question online?
Please. All right. This is actually a very good question, and I'd like to bring us back to Singapore Fintech Festival. Now, in Singapore Fintech Festival, Project Orchid, which is one of the projects, if we go back one slide, possible or not possible? Yeah, over here, right? Project Orchid. So when we did this demo in Singapore Fintech Festival just a couple of months ago, right? We tried a variety of ways to get the general public to try and use the retail CBDC, right? It was on the Polygon network. So we said, hey, maybe you can download MetaMask or one whole list of, you can just see which wallet you want to use, download it so that we can give you your retail CBDC, your purpose for money, right? And then we found that there was quite a few interesting things that people were not familiar with. For example, due to the concept of gas, what we saw is some people were unable to make payments, right? Their wallet balance didn't have enough of a native currency, so they couldn't transfer the purpose of money out. Some of them were not familiar with the UI UX of the tool that they were using. And I think this tracks really well because your question was how would people interact with digital assets in the future, right? And I think that it's important, firstly, that it has to be pretty much invisible, right? I think one very strong barometer of success is when you don't even realize that you're using a digital asset, right? You don't have to jump through many, many hoops to use it. It's not counterintuitive. It's intuitive to you. I think that is the first standard of the first metric of success that we can use when monitoring digital assets, right? The following one is the enablement. Now, blockchain, which is primarily used for many, many digital assets, right, purports a wide variety of benefits. One of them being auditability, right? If I, for example, make a Paylah transaction to maybe Alicia, right? Alicia in the crowd. Oh, okay, yeah, there you are. I have no idea what was the transaction history and stuff, right? I don't have any idea on the transparency and stuff. The moment we start to tap on to this transparency for the purpose of maybe KYC, for the purpose of AML, all the good stuff that financial institutions are looking at. The moment we're able to tap on that, in addition to make it invisible to the end user, I think that is when our interactions with digital assets could be said to be significantly higher than what it is today.
We actually have an online participant, a question from David. So he asked, blockchain seems to be a hot space for FIs. All of them wants it. DBS, for example, launched their own collaboration with Sandbox for the metaverse. So what is OCBC's response to this, as well as DBS Digital Exchange?
So if you were to go back to the, previously the industry. Yeah, so there are various different business use cases. The metaverse being just one of customer engagement channels. So yeah, whichever. the one on the industry. Yeah. So if you notice, Sandbox is just one form of a partnership with a metaverse provider. So it is a space that we are looking into. Like for example, we have launched our virtual OCBC thing and still a lot more work in progress. That's what much our team is experimenting on. That's one space. That's the AR/VR space. And then on the digital asset exchange, that one actually is just an additional business revenue. So they have been expanding it in phases. So basically, they allow corporate or institutional clients and to actually trade cryptocurrencies. And now they've recently expanded it to high net worth individuals. But of course, that's only by invitation. So that's just one of many financial services that it's just a new financial service, a new business revenue. We are also, looking into the various different spaces as we have shown just now, and many more to come. Yeah.
I think also, I like to highlight two things, right? So firstly, the view on blockchain, right? The fact that DBS has done some stuff, the fact that OCBC is doing other stuff, right? I think it's really, firstly, it's not a competition, right? I think what we do is we look at our clients, we look at our staff, and we think about how we best deliver programs or things in order to best contribute to the welfare and the satisfaction of the employees of the clients and the employees, right? And because the demographics are generally different between DBS and OCBC, you may see that we are focusing on different stuff, right? We may have another building. We may go on Decentraland, for example. We may go on Sandbox, or we may even have a crypto exchange. Who knows, right? But when it does, it is not really seen as a response per se. It is when we have done our due diligence and we think this at this point of time, this is what benefits our clients and our employees the best. That is when we will come in and do it. Yeah.
Actually, the idea of blockchain related use cases as well, the UI UX may not appear very different from the UI UX you see now that is controlled by big tech, but the idea here is purpose bound. So when you program money via the blockchain network to send to someone, the code actually ensures the auditability and traceability to ensure that it's sent to the intended recipient. Because if you were to use digital money, which is basically the money you get in your e-wallets right now, there is no way to track. And even on a settlement level, just because you send money on from one person to the other, there is a network of various different payment network that you can't see. So that's on the back end. So in a way, like Web3 or blockchain enhances things in a more principle level, right? Like democratization, decentralization. These things are not very apparent just on the UI UX level. Yeah.
How we answer David, right? Any more questions?
Not for now.
Yeah. I thought people follow David. So yeah. What should we do?
Oh,
any more questions?
Please, ma'am.
Or let's say you're a startup and you're in game farming, where do you think the biggest opportunity is? What problems?
Okay. That's a tricky question, you see, because if I reply, and firstly, I have to qualify. My reply may not necessarily represent that of the bank, because we don't have answer for that. No, okay, but okay, let's talk a bit about GameFi, right? Now, play to earn, play and earn, all sorts of GameFi, DeFi principles and stuff, right? You mentioned regulation, and I think that is absolutely pertinent, right? Because many times GameFi is seen, if you were to look at the laws in, let's say, Korea or China, it will be seen as gambling right out. Because if you look at the laws, you're not supposed to be able to exchange your in-game items with an external party for cash in a very direct manner, right? Because then you have many concerns of money laundering and stuff, which is precisely because of the intangible value that you see in these game items, right? Now, one bypass that a lot of people have been using is NFTs, right? In order to get around these regulations, and of course, hosting their games in perhaps even Southeast Asia, where it has been generally seen to be a bit more accommodative to GameFi. But if you ask me what is the opportunity in the space, I think that firstly, we got to really understand the economics, right? Many GameFi is quite inflationary in nature. Look at Axie Infinity, very inflationary, right? And I think firstly the tokenomics, the game economics, I would say, has to be sorted out in a manner that is sustainable, right? I'm not saying there is no game like that. What I'm saying is that that is the first step into achieving more widespread adoption, right? And the second, of course, being compliance with the regulation so that you can, of course, enter bigger markets. And I think finally, you will also look at treasury services. If you look at a lot of GameFi today, right, one key problem is custodial or non-custodial. The moment I'm doing non-custodial, I bet a guess. And then I incur so much money just to trade my NFT and stuff. It can be a pain point for some people who's coming from Web2 and is used to not having to pay for all this, right? Then again, if you have custodial services, then how do you differentiate between Web3 and Web2 games? That is another question, right? Do you really need a token? What is the utility of the token? In short, I think there's a lot of questions to be answered, right? But it's precisely by answering these questions that you find the opportunity in the space.
Okay, we have a follow-up question from David. So he wants to know, how has regulations in Singapore affect OCBC's development in fintech or blockchain?
Yeah, I can answer for the blockchain part.
Okay.
Fintech, you handle.
Okay.
Actually, the good thing about being a local bank, right, is that we talk to MAS a lot. They're like, we really just, hey bro, coffee. No, I'm joking, but we speak to them a lot. And I think as a local bank, we do, we are quite defensive in nature. So we do consult the MAS before we want to run any, I would say, initiative that we think would be sensitive, right? As long as there's any room for doubt, first thing you consult MAS. And we follow the MAS guidance, right? We don't try to do anything outside the guidance. So in a way, on one end, you can say that it is the MAS that shaped our policy, but I will also say that's not entirely correct, because the way I've observed is that the MAS is very open-minded, and they are very liberal to say, right? They actually aggregate opinions across the sector, and they do a lot of due diligence and give you a lot of thought before they form anything, right? And I think that is really the relationship. It is really a lot of give and take between the local banks and the regulators. And in the spirit of ensuring that what we do is right for purpose and right for the people of the jurisdictions that we cover. I think that would be the way we work the MAS and how it influences, at least on blockchain digital asset related kind of topics.
So I probably will provide a little bit more principle or philosophical guidance because I used to be a regulator. I mean, it is no surprise that during the digital wave, people tend to say that banks and financial services in general were somehow unperturbed by it. Like, the whole Uber, Airbnb concept and stuff. Then finally, there's the fintech wave. And that's unsurprising because the financial service sector is the most heavily regulated sector. So the thing is, regulators have also been shifting their mindset dynamically. Like they don't purposely make things prohibitive just for the sake of doing so. I mean, some of the things, this is not just for MAF, but rather regulators in general. There's a shift from being like, prescriptive based to principle based. So as long as the intention or the philosophy of the financial services is there, and the value proposition being proportionate to the risk relating to it, then number one, the prudential policy, basically your gatekeeping and compliance policy documents should be aligned, or if necessary, then there will be policy amendments, either through sandbox or various other engagements. And then there's also the developmental regulatory side. Most of the time it's industry-led, but sometimes it is regulatory-led, whether a collaboration across other regulators like BIS, etc. So that's where you get all your like R&D space to actually really understand. And of course, sometimes when you look at all of these technologies, right, regulators, they don't overstep out of the line. Like there are some things that is purely on the process efficiency level, as long as, stuff like your outsourcing risk or your technology risk assessment risk is all aligned to the core principles. There is no reason for them, number one, to be prohibitive. They also want to ensure that they're relevant and dynamic, because obviously they also have to stay relevant, otherwise you get another financial crisis, right? and the second being, of course, is they also use this as an opportunity to develop, like, ESG, inclusivity. There's a lot of like urbanization or even financial exclusion gaps. So these are all mandates that they also see technology as an opportunity to also help the regulators achieve their goals. Yeah.
Okay, David, follow up by asking, wouldn't innovation be stiffened due to these regulations?
Stephen or
Stiffened,
stifled?
stifled.
Stifled?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, good, very, very, very good question, David. Keep the questions coming. But yes, innovation, right? You see, innovation, in my opinion, and I think Celine can add on, right, actually exists in the spectrum, in my opinion. There is a saying that academia is 20 years ahead of industry, right? So the innovation even starts even before we have seen it being productionized. Innovation starts from papers, right? People write publications, purport some idea, and this is where people look at it and say, hey, let me try something out of it. And then you have a whole ecosystem of people trying to make the innovation happen, right? And sometimes there's a lot of trial and error. For example, if you look at why ChatGPT is actually doable today, right? It is the accumulation of hard work at a lot of areas, right? It's on the modeling side, on the tensor side, on even the data side, right? You could, even with the same algorithms, you wouldn't have been able to do anything like that without the data, right? Even a few years ago. So going back to topic on the innovation spectrum, right? I would say that regulation is not here to stifle, and if I say the word wrongly, please tell me. Yeah, it's not here to stifle innovation. Regulation is meant to ensure that innovation is used responsibly. Take cryptocurrency, for example, right? I think personally, Bitcoin and Ethereum, fantastic innovations, right? Really game changer. But if there was no regulation going around it, the entire industry can collapse very fast, right? Because people don't know what they're dealing with. People don't, and scams become very prevalent. And I think that is actually something we have seen happen a couple of times in the industry already, right? So there is always an area for innovation, and we always see the effects of innovation on an upward slope. And when innovation or rather when people start thinking about this innovation going mainstream, I think that is where the regulators need to step in and ensure that it is approached in a very responsible way before we're able to continue. Because if not, things can really go bad.
I mean, this space is always a work in progress, which is why a lot of these startups, they tend to say that I try to be regulatory light. But I mean, where regulatory parity is concerned, you notice regulators, they tend to say that there are a few non-negotiables. One is your AML, CFT, so sanction this, etc. A lot of remittance companies, for example, like sometimes there's an overlook in all of this risk and compliance. So AML, CFT is one. consumer market conducts the other. So there's abuse here, you know, you have to make sure that it's fair for the public. Otherwise, how do you gain public trust? I mean, this is one example where MAS did a clamp down, right, on all the crypto-related stuff of the buy and sell security elements to it. And then obviously, actually, there's also another two area, financial system stability, but this is only if you are systemic. And well, that's only if you are on a large institutional related interbank size. And the last one is actually monetary stability. So actually, this is one of those concerns in, like, say, CBDCs. Like, what happens if you have like stable coins being locked up, then suddenly your OPI interest rate is not as effective as a policy tool. So these are like the 4 non-negotiables actually as a regulator to ensure regulatory parity. But of course, sometimes if there are mini innovations and then you do not want to meet the full gatekeeping or regulatory requirements, there are some areas that people would talk, I mean, like whether FTA, MAS, GNM or whatever, they would say that, oh, as long as the industry or the activity you're doing is well understood and there's low risk with, like, you know, controlled parameter, transaction size, customer size or whatever, then do whatever you want. But of course, that one really varies by jurisdiction. Yeah.
In other words, follow law by law. Please, ma'am. Okay. When it comes to ecosystem, right, I would like to think about it as what can the NFT be used for? And I mean, if my definition is not consistent with your question, please let me know, right? But so where I think we are approaching NFT, right? Firstly is we really try to look at what can NFTs do that is practical for the benefit of the bank. And the most immediate answer here is efficiency, right? Efficiency in disbursement, distribution, etc., which sometimes leads us to the concept of asset tokenization, i.e., I tokenize the asset in the form of an NFT. Now, the other one is looking at Web3, looking at the industry trends, right? Increased anonymity, increased privacy. And I think that's where we look at the industry and we see why are so many celebrities putting Bored Apes or Azukis on as the profile pictures, right? Is it because everyone knows them? Everyone knows who these celebrities are. So why are you doing it? Is it because you relate to the image, or is it because you bought it at a huge price and you want to show off and stuff? We are looking into that, trying to understand what exactly is this paradigm shift. And at the same time, we are conducting experiments of our own, right? One key thing about, or rather, a few things about NFT. One of them is one ecosystem is I would say the collectible ecosystem, right? When you purchase it for the purpose of being a collectible, similar to rare trading cards, similar to others, right? You see football clubs coming to sell collectibles of the players and stuff. And that is where we think, is there any value, okay, creating collectibles that are relatable to people? And I think that is the first few steps that we are trying to do. We create this relation between the user and the NFT in various degrees. It may not just be the 90 years of giving, which I showed just now. It may not just be that. It could be avatars, for example, right? You may see a OCBC avatar, for example. What animal or what thing, I don't know. But it could be that. There are plans, and we are discussing, of course, discussing being the key word, or it could even be access rights, right? Sometimes we have seen with art, for example, ownership of the NFT allows you exclusive access to a network and stuff. And we are looking at this. Is this something that we want to adopt for our clients, of our employees, right? Does it make sense? Is there any benefit or utility to doing so? No right answer, no wrong answer. But the real answer comes after we have done the due diligence and experimentation and final conclusions, which is why we have started doing all these experiments and starting pushing things to production, started doing things so that we can start to observe the results of these that will help us give us an informed opinion on how we move on with all of this.
I think we can have one more question, one last question.
David? Oh, no, sorry. You have a question?
Did anyone else want to ask?
I mean, I'm here for a long time now. You can just ask me later. lah.
Maybe wants to ask.
No,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I'll ask the question. I think without a doubt, like Singapore's like NUS and whole financial infrastructure is like it's very efficient and effective compared like our surrounding countries, for example. But do you feel like that itself would be holding us back in terms of blockchain development? Because in other countries, for example, like financial space isn't very like developed. The infrastructure is not really there. So in a sense, like out of the need for better infrastructure and system, then like people kind of expedite the process of developing like for example payment systems that's built on the blockchain. But in Singapore, it's like everyone's very used to like what we have, which is really very good. So do you feel like in a sense Singapore will be slower than other countries in terms of building this blockchain infrastructure, and also like on that note also, like what is one thing that can focus on, I guess, like in this whole development process? Yeah.
I can go, or you have something?
So I mean, like if I were to go into that, I think you're measuring deltas in terms of value proposition, but the use of like these enabling technologies maybe for different use cases. Like for example, in other ASEAN countries, they may use all of this, not just blockchain, for, like I said, the financial inclusion agenda, which may not necessarily be the case in Singapore, though you also have migrant workers, etc. That's one. But the blockchain values also offers in, on the cross-border regional level as well, in terms of connectivity, borderless, and even back-end processes. So I would say that the value proposition varies, but maybe the number of use cases in other places would be more. So, but at the end of the day, they also have to prioritize. So I think it's just a matter of a prioritization, because I do see the amount of value really depends on how much is being put into the execution anyway. Like there is no saying to say, okay, that's enough customer experience, that's enough cost savings and efficiency. So yeah, I don't think that we get less value proposition out of it compared to those who have more opportunity. I guess you're seeing it in the aspect of like, oh, when China was using WeChat wallet, and then like the US is not adopting e-wallet because they already have an efficient payment cards. So maybe there are some areas like, financial inclusion agenda isn't as big, but we do have an ESG agenda that is very big, So we just look into different areas that values more of our resource focus into. Yeah.
So as you can see, what she was thinking, talking, I was thinking also, right? I think there are two layers to this answer, right? Now, the first layer is that, yes, Singapore is trying to be, I would say, a hub for digital assets, right? But I think one thing is that Singapore, I would be very hesitant to say that, Singapore is faster or better than any other country. I think every country moves at its own pace, especially regarding cryptocurrency and digital assets for the benefit of the people that they govern, right? It's a lot harder to move when you are governing a billion people as opposed to a couple of million, right? And this, of course, affects policy making. So the interesting thing was the answer was whether we will have inertia because of our attempt in being very well regulated. I would need to paraphrase the question. And I think that actually regulation doesn't move alone. Actually, regulation moves along with the industry, along with think tanks and academia and stuff. More often than not, it moves alongside everyone you have in the country, right? And I think Singapore is very fortunate to be a hub, a business hub for cryptocurrency in the very early days, right? 2017-18 ICO stage. A lot of companies came into Singapore. It sparked the shift in talent. So more talent came to Singapore, right? And when you have more talent who can speak about this subject more knowledgeably, you get a lot better conversations, and people in the country benefit from this. It will all trickle upwards, for lack of better word, to the regulators, right? And these benefits and economies of scale are enjoyed across the industry, not just in terms of the business side, the corporate side, but even the regulatory side. And that is where the country then has a greater ability to say, we have been having these conversations. what do we want to do about these conversations? And it's very hard to make a policy if you don't even have this conversation in the first place, which is why some countries, they invite experts to fly down to the country just so that they can hold these conversations. In Singapore, I think we were very fortunate to have to see that these conversations are a lot more complex. I was just at some random cafe in Raffles City, and I saw people talking about how important it is to have regulation in the wake of FTX collapse. And I was like, wow, I was just here having coffee and here I am hearing that. And I go to other places and I hear the same. People are actively talking about it, people like you and me. And I think these are what helps a country navigate the regulatory landscape better and what helps a country move faster as well. So, yeah.
Okay, due to time constraints, I'm afraid we gotta end this session here. So before we actually end, we actually have a token of appreciation. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm saying the mic. Thank you.
Thank you.
You first.